Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Reddit ProRevenge. I've got 6 stories for you in this episode that I hope you'll enjoy. As always, I hope you stay for all the stories and subscribe for future videos. Teachers are supposed to teach, right? They're not supposed to make you feel dumb about not knowing something or make fun of you in front of the whole class. This first story is titled, "The Time I Ruined My High School Teacher's Career and Got Her Fired in the Greatest Way Possible." Backstory. I was a senior in high school at the time, and I had never been the brightest student. I was a solid C student, and I had never received a detention or had any kind of bad student record. This is important because, to this day, I still have no idea why the teacher treated me this way. The teacher, who we will name Mrs. Frank, had been a teacher there for almost a decade and was widely known for being a petty, heartless jerk who the administrators saw as the golden child. Mrs. Frank taught algebra, which was my worst subject, so naturally I had issues understanding the lessons and would ask questions frequently. To sum up, these questions were easily answered, but to me, it was rocket science. Usually when someone asked a dumb question, no one should address it. However, in Mrs. Frank's case, she would belittle me in front of everyone by saying things such as, "And here comes the slow boy again, wow. Surprise, surprise, you don't understand it again, or really we have to go extra slow for you today, don't we?" I tried going to the administration about it, but again, she was considered the golden child. They would send someone in to examine her during class. She would act respectful and normal for one day and go back to being a jerk the next. This went on for about half the year until I had enough. I went to the local Radio Shack, bought a recorder, and secretly recorded every insult she would throw at me. Fast forward to the end of the year, and I'm sitting in Mrs. Frank's class when I ask a question. Her response, and I quote because it's been burned into my brain, was, "I've been teaching here for over 10 years, and that was the single dumbest question I've ever heard come from anyone's mouth." She continued the lesson without answering. I calmly stood up, packed my stuff, and headed to the nurse's office to dismiss myself from school. I went home, compiled all of the brutal tapes into one glorious masterpiece, and headed back the next day to show the administrators. I sat down with the principal, and we listened to a couple of insults before he stopped me. He told me we would meet the next day, where I could show him and the rest of the administrators the full tape. I walked into the school the next morning, being the most nervous I've ever been for anything. I was called down to the office, where I met with some board directors, the local school police officer, the principal, the vice principal, and Mrs. Frank. What followed was some of the greatest minutes of my life. I watched as the administrators turned furious and speechless, with some of them keeping their mouths open for the duration of the tape. I also watched Mrs. Frank go from confident and stuck up to realizing that she'd messed up beyond repair. The tape ended, and without hesitation, the administrators looked around in astonishment. The principal turned to me and said, "I think we've heard everything we need to, thank you." I was quietly dismissed from the room. The final time I saw Mrs. Frank was as I was leaving the room. I looked back and we made eye contact through her tear-filled eyes as I gave the biggest, most evil smile. I returned to class the next week, and Mrs. Frank was nowhere to be found. The story spread quickly throughout the school, and I was seen as a saint. I had successfully gotten her fired and made it almost impossible for Mrs. Frank to return to her teaching career, as well as cut off most of her connections that she had with other teachers in the school. I had ruined her financially because no school in the district area would hire this walking piece of garbage. If you're reading this, Mrs. Frank, I'd like to take this moment to tell you to go screw yourself. Sometimes the best revenge is doing the right thing. This next story is titled, "My Worst Job Ever." When I was fresh out of high school, my sister's boyfriend offered me a job as a mechanic at a local dealership. The job was an apprenticeship and was at one of the worst dealerships I've ever had the displeasure of working at. I could tell you dozens of stories about being an apprentice that would discourage anyone from taking up the position. However, I feel like my experience can be summed up in 3 examples of mistreatment. A 4th-year apprentice was taking a gearbox out of a small car, probably weighing about 30 kilograms or 60 pounds. He told me to catch the gearbox as it came out of the car while he undid the last bolt. I told him there was no way that I'm catching a falling mass that was that heavy. He told me that I would get sacked if I didn't do what I was told. A fool could have seen it coming. The gearbox fell, I was unable to catch it, and the casing broke on the ground as it landed. The foreman came by and blamed me for the incident. My wages were docked to pay for the gearbox housing. I was later humiliated by another apprentice who filmed the entire event on his camera phone. Basically, it was me trying horribly to catch it, as I predicted. In another incident, I was asked to retrieve 2 tires from the cage, a literal lockable chicken wire cage about 10 square meters large and 4 meters high, to fit a vehicle to collect the tires. I needed to climb a ladder to get them from the top rack. As I was up there, I heard the gate close, and one of the mechanics had locked me in the cage as part of a hazing ritual. It was about 35 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit that day, and I was locked in there for 2 hours. Whenever a mechanic came past and saw that I was in the cage, they would take a nearby fire hose and try to hose me down in there. By the time I got out of the cage, I had such bad sunburn that I couldn't come into work the next day because I was still vomiting from the heat stroke. My boss did not approve the time off, and I was given leave without pay. For the next story, there was an incident where we recovered a bumper or fender. We used to save these bumpers in case we ever dented one, so we had spares. Essentially, I was asked to place a bumper on 2 hooks, and then climb a ladder to the top of the workstation and hang the bumper on the rafters at the top of the workshop for storage. I don't know if you've ever tried to climb a ladder with no hands while holding a large and heavy load, but I assure you, it's difficult. As I was climbing the ladder, it started slipping on the greasy workshop floor and eventually collapsed under me, causing me to fall 4 meters, about 15 feet, dropping the bumper, injuring my hand, and resulting in me once again being humiliated by a mechanic who was filming the whole ordeal. I was told that it was my fault that I fell off the ladder because I wasn't doing it right. I should note that I had asked another apprentice to hold the bottom of the ladder, and they had neglected to do so. Suffice to say, I was sick of how this company operated, so I spent the next 2 weeks taking photos of unsafe work practices. I took photos of lots of things, including people using a grinder with no guards, no goggles, and no gloves, people smoking next to open fuel sources, an apprentice locked in a grease pit, another hazing ritual, and yes, I opened it after taking the photo, 2 apprentices moving a heavy piece of shop machinery into storage by pushing it up a flimsy wooden ramp, apprentices working at heights without railings, hazardous chemical materials that were stored well, anywhere, not locked up. You get the idea. I sent the photos, along with some accounts of my personal experiences and anecdotal evidence of other unsafe practices, to WorkSafe, a government body that fines workplaces for unsafe practices and ensures that they clean their act up. The company that I worked for received over $100,000 in fines and had to spend probably another $25,000 in repairs to bring their workshop up to spec. The local mechanics union became involved too and caused problems around the treatment of apprentices and unsafe work practices in general. This place is still the largest employer of apprentices in my area, but I hear they treat people a lot better now. Some teachers can be downright mean, and unfortunately, some teachers may even be the worst bullies you'll ever have. This story is titled, "Throw a Book at My Head. We'll see who has the last laugh." So, this happened back in my freshman year of high school, about 20 years ago. A little bit of backstory: I was born with neurofibromatosis, a genetic condition that causes tumor growth on nerve endings and a large list of other problems like early onset puberty, blindness, epilepsy, death, etc. I had this teacher who, if you called her an ancient old hag, you'd be polite. For whatever reason, she had it out for me, and I can only pin it down to her being a bully. Now, I had been sick because of my medical condition and had action plans with the school so as not to fall behind. The teacher knew of my condition because of this. So, one day, I came into the classroom, and there was a depiction of me on the whiteboard with the words, "Tumor Boy," above it. The teacher just shrugged and laughed. She had disclosed my medical condition to the entire class. I told the principal, nothing. I told the guidance counselor, nothing. I told my parents, nothing. Nobody believed me. It was my word against hers. So for now, I let it go. I'm very patient, so I knew I'd get another opportunity. In another incident, she hit my hand with a ruler when I asked her to stop taunting me in front of the other students, as my medical condition was nobody's business but my own. She told the class that I had brain tumors, which was why my head was so large. Then I got a case of the flu and missed about a week of school. So I asked if I could bring a recorder to school to tape lessons to catch up. It was immediately put in my file. For whatever reason, it was in my file, so she should have known about the agreement. So now, I knew if she acted like a rancid jerk again, her ass was mine. All I needed was bait, which pretty much just took me showing up the very next day at school. I'm sitting in class with the recorder taping in my bag, and she started with the daily routine of asking someone to draw a picture of me and all my tumors on the whiteboard. I again asked her to stop, and this is where the book was thrown at my head with a loud thud, followed by a profanity-filled tirade about how terrible of a child I am. It's at this point I stopped the recorder and told her exactly what I thought of her. I was then physically removed from the class and taken to the principal's office, and I was expelled. Once I got home, I showed my parents the tape. Within 20 minutes we were back at the school, playing it for the principal and the vice principal, threatening legal action. Needless to say, my expulsion was lifted, and she was fired on the spot just before retirement, losing her retirement money. This story is titled, "It Was a Little League Football Game. It Didn't Have to End Like This." When I was in 10th grade, I got into refereeing football for a little league in town. I got hired by a random booster club mom, and she told me that they paid us in cash out of the snack cart money. So, the owner of the league, we'll call him D from here, was generally a nice guy and had a son on the team. D was the guy living out his failed childhood through his 9-year-old kid. The season was going great, except when I had to referee his games. He would get mad at any call involving his son, no matter what happened. If this kid was on the line and went off sides, we were expected not to call it. Well, I like to make things as fair as possible for the kids, so I would always call it. This would set him off, and he would come running from the sidelines yelling at me. I tried to talk to him multiple times, but his reply was always the same. It's my league, so it's my rules. So, I moved on and just kept doing my job. The season was winding down, and his kids' team happened to make it to the championship. The head coaches get to choose one referee each. D chose Doug. Doug's cool, I like Doug. The other coach chose me. D called me midweek, telling me there was going to be an NFL representative there to do the coin toss and evaluate the league for a sponsorship. Annoyed with his mid-game disruptions, I decided to have some petty revenge. On the day of the game, I showed up and just acted like always. I got everything set up, then called out the captains. Out came D with his son, the other coach, and his captain. We got everything started, and at first I let the little things go. I felt giddy, but I knew I had to let the kid win a bit so he would really feel the burn. The score was tied with 4 minutes left when I saw an opportunity to strike. It was 4th down on their own 15-yard line. D's son was the quarterback, and instead of taking a snap from the center, he said, "Hike," and picked up the ball. Normally I would let this go, but it was D's kid, so I tossed my flag, expecting a 5 to 10-yard run. You can imagine I was a bit surprised when he took it all the way for an 85-yard touchdown. Everyone on their sidelines was going crazy, including D, when the other coach started yelling, "Hold up! Flag! There's a flag!" I called a meeting in the middle of the field and explained what happened. D wasn't having it. He was staying surprisingly calm and said I could either declare a touchdown or take off my uniform. So, I quit. I was waiting for the booster lady to pay me when she got a call and said D told her not to pay me. I waited until D was available and had it out with him. He made it clear that I was paid under the table and that I could basically go get lost. Time for some serious revenge. I talked to the NFL representative on the way out and told him what was going on, and he seemed a little pissed off. Then I went ahead and called the IRS and gave them all the information I had. I forgot all about it for a few weeks. Then I got a call from Doug asking if I was the one who reported D. He explained that D had 6 other businesses that had a lot of under-the-table dealings. He ended the call by saying, "That was pretty messed up. It was just a little league football game. It didn't have to end like this." D had a multi-million-dollar house, 2 nice cars, and a loving family, and $120 screwed him out of it all. If you hate someone, be nice to their friends and then ruin them. This story is titled, "Don't Let Your Enemy Be a Friend of Your Friends." So, I was flicking through Facebook when I remembered something I did to someone in secondary school. Details are a little hazy, but here goes. Back in school, I was several things: awkward, weird in the extreme, a bit of a runt, and physically weak. I had the fortune to go to one of the grammar schools in the UK, so for the most part, nothing happened. But one person who I remember sticks out. I'll call him short for something unkind. He was quite possibly the meanest bully I've ever had. He was always trying something against me, and as a result, I spent a lot of time in the library or with teachers. After all, I was sick of him constantly trying to trip me, steal my things, or, most annoyingly of all, copy my work. I took great pride in my success. I tried not to let it show, but every once in a while I would eventually break down. This persisted for the first 2 years. He always acted alone. Perhaps because he was trying not to look bad in front of everyone else. Anyhow, after those 2 years, decided to shove me in a locker. I'm claustrophobic, and he knew that. When I was trying to frantically resist, he left me with a broken nose. I was locked inside and was only let out when a teacher heard my pathetic sobs and pleas for help. He was suspended for a week. I spent some time in the medical room, and a week later, it was all resolved, except for the resentment I had. Not cool. The teachers were off the ball and doing nothing to protect me. I wanted this guy to suffer. I eventually got my chance in mathematics. I was one of the best in the class. One of his friends was sorely struggling. I wasn't the most socially adept person, but I knew my math. When he ended up sitting next to me, I helped him out and gave him pointers. His grades began to improve. He started helping me out with things like art. I didn't really improve much, but we forged an unlikely friendship. The compound effect was twofold. Not only had I gained some protection from but I also entered his extended group of friends. This friend I made started dragging me along to hang out with them during break periods. Within 6 months, I was friends with all of A's friends. I always acted friendly around and never brought up anything at all. His friends were nice guys and treated me really well. I eventually suggested setting up a study group in the library and offered to arrange it. I asked about when everyone was available, and I always had things to do when was available. How inconvenient. As such, although he was invited, I made sure he wasn't there. Suffice to say, due to us studying together once a week, our grades in our weaker subjects started to improve. As for he hadn't put much work into his own success. Without his friends to mooch from, his grades started tanking. Suddenly he was being really nice to me, trying to apologize in private so he wouldn't lose face in front of his friends. I told him my answer simply. This is the only exact phrase I remember. You want to apologize? You apologize to me in front of your friends. This was now 8 months after the school locker incident. He told me he would apologize. Okay, cool. I arranged the study group. This time he could make it. He gave his apology to me in front of his friends. I asked if he was doing this just for grades. After all, his friends knew his grades were tanking, and ours were on the rise. My friends flipped out, asking him very pointed questions about what had happened. In that moment, I cut off from his friends and took them as my own. His former friends were quick to ostracize him. I breezed through the rest of grammar school. We went our separate ways at college, took different subjects, and the group disbanded. Why was I reminded? Despite not talking to any of these guys in almost a decade, I found on Facebook, and it asked if I knew him. I had a quick look at his profile, very few friends, working a deadbeat job at 26 as a cashier, and no one from my old study group was a friend of his. What would you do if you found out your wife was cheating on you, not with one but multiple other men? This story is titled, Not Your Meal Ticket. Well, this story starts out like quite a few others. I was in the U.S. Army and became attracted to a woman whom I ended up marrying. At first, she was all I could ever ask for in a woman, sweet, caring, one hell of a cuddler. She didn't really like video games like I did, but made an effort to get into them so we could spend time together doing something we both enjoyed. Let's call her Thunder Cunt, or TC, for reasons you will soon know. I met TC through one of the other soldiers I worked with, who we'll call Battle Buddy or Bean B, since he was not at fault in this. It was in the middle of the week and I had just finished up work and was taking a quick break for a drink of water. I heard BB asking a few other soldiers if they were open for a date that upcoming weekend. Now, I knew from a few other friends that BB was straight, so I was curious why he was asking. Long story short, BB had a female friend who was looking for a date for a movie that coming weekend. I offered to go with his friend, and she and I hit it off rather well. We continued to see each other. Months passed. It hadn't been enough time for me to consider marriage yet, but she had some spontaneous ailments, seizures that were legit and sprang up out of nowhere. Since these only seemed to happen in her sleep, and my command wouldn't let me stay off post with her without being married, light bulb. We got a courtroom wedding 2 weeks later. The added bonus, not only could I stay with her while she slept to be ready in case of another episode, but my TRICARE would fully cover her medical costs. I was happy, she was happy. I got to tell my command, now you can't stop me from staying with her, and we all lived happily ever after. Except we didn't. Things went well for a while, as I described at the beginning, but after a bit I started noticing things. Things like her needing to take her mother to the doctor's office quite frequently. Her mother was sickly, so I didn't think much of it at first. Or needing to head to the Walmart one town over, because the one in our town didn't have what she needed in stock. Also, the car I bought and let her use seemed to be parked in a lot next to several different trailer parks in a month. Well, as luck would have it, right as I started to get suspicious, I came down on orders to PCS to Korea, sidelining the investigation until I was able to continue. I packed, kissed my wife goodbye, and let the army send me where they wanted me. I spent a year in Korea, then came down on orders for Texas. It was there that I found out exactly what was going on, courtesy of her mom, brother, and her aunt and uncle. This woman was sleeping with 60, not even kidding, in the slightest, different men, most of them soldiers. Her excuse to her family was, "Frizzmaster's gay, and he doesn't want to come out, so he's pointing out the men I can sleep with since he knows they're clean." So, basically, this woman was using me as a paycheck and a meal ticket, and screwing everything with a pulse that happened to be male. The icing on the cake, 2 weeks after I got the good news, she called me and confessed to cheating on me once. The only reason she confessed? She was pregnant, and there was no way I could be the father, given I was in a different state at the time, and the father was African American. I am very much not African American, having been called neon white on more than one occasion due to my Irish ancestry. So there was no possible way this child would look like me at all. She felt the need to break the news to me before she had the baby, because she could no longer hide it. Well, things happened. I went back home without her knowing and removed my belongings from the house I bought to keep her from selling them once she realized what I was about to do. I started divorce proceedings. This is revenge number 1. I saw her boyfriend, not the baby's father, a new guy entirely, driving my car. So I enlisted the help of her aunt and uncle to get my car back. They pulled up behind him in a parking lot, got out, and talked to him normally. At that time, I walked up from the other side of the parking lot. Her uncle asked to see the keys and upon receiving them began taking the car key off the ring and waved me forward. I walked up, took the car key from him, looked at the guy and said, "Hi, my name's Frizzmaster and this is my car. I'm taking it now." I waved him over to the sidewalk, removed everything from the car that didn't have my name on it, left the items with him, then got in my car and drove off. I found out later that day that he had packed everything and left her. Apparently he had been living in my house, eating my food, sleeping in my bed and wearing my clothes. Plus, she had been using the money I sent her every month to pay for his court costs and child support. Well, months went by and our court date came up. My lawyer recommended that I file for sole use of the vehicle and the property since it was obvious she had committed adultery and didn't have a leg to stand on. We went to court. She counterfiled for the exact same, and since she refused to release the results of a paternity test, I got stonewalled. The exact words used by the judge were, "I'm sorry, but without proof of the paternity of the child, I cannot in good conscience approve either of these motions." So, he set a new date for a private hearing with the judge and we waited. Nearly 3 months went by and the court date was finally near. I walked into the courthouse, met up with my lawyer, who had a demonic glint in his eye at the time, went into the courtroom and waited. 20 minutes later she walked in, shot me a dirty look, which I did my best to ignore, and sat down. The judge came in 5 minutes later, the court was called to order, and the divorce trial commenced. Here, I found out just what had given my lawyer that twinkle in his eye earlier. He proceeded to ask TC a series of questions, including 1. Is my client the father of your child? 2. When was the child conceived? 3. Where was my client during the time at which your child was conceived? 4. Do you know who the father of your child is? 5. Have you received child support from the father of your child? Basically, he questioned her into a legal corner in which she either had to answer truthfully or lie and suffer the legal ramifications of perjury in the face of easily provable evidence. She answered truthfully, luckily for her, and the court case continued. She presented her arguments, littered with dirt she was trying to throw at me, insults to my person, questions about my sexual orientation, and claims that I was having a relationship with her 18-year-old cousin. Falling back on my military training, I simply sat up straight, folded my hands in front of me on the table, and stared at a spot on the wall slightly above the judge's left shoulder. I answered every question asked of me, offered no personal opinions, threw no dirt, and refused to sink to her level and question her sexuality. Subsequently, she had a more and more confused look on her face as I refrained from bad-mouthing her like she was doing to me. And the divorce trial went by rather quickly. At the conclusion of the trial, the judge looked over the paperwork submitted one last time, then looked at both of us and said, "Are there any closing remarks or claims that need to be made?" TC made one last parting swipe about me currently living with her aunt and uncle, and I merely shook my head and resumed staring at the wall. The judge took one last look at the papers, set them down, and spoke the greatest words I've ever heard in my life. He said, "Well, looking over the evidence and testimonies presented, there is really only one decision I can come to. Mr. Frizzmaster, I'm approving your motions for exclusive use of your vehicle and property upon undeniable evidence of adultery. Mrs. Frizzmaster, the only one of your motions I'm granting today is your legal request for a no-contact order, and that's more for Mr. Frizzmaster's benefit than your own. You seem very combative and willing to cause him legal damage that he was not due, and your repeated attempts to overtalk me while I was reviewing the paperwork did not speak well of you. You no longer have a claim to either the property or the vehicle, and will not contact Mr. Frizzmaster unless it is to have him clarify which items do not belong to you. TC had the audacity to work up a sniffle and ask the judge, But, where do I go? What do I do for a place to live? The judge looked back at her and replied, Well, Mrs. Frizzmaster, you have 30 days to figure that out, after which you will not set foot on that property again, or else you'll be held in contempt of court. Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Reddit ProRevenge. I hope you enjoyed these stories today. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for future revenge stories. See you in the next one.